acknowledgement. The Comox Valley Regional District respectfully acknowledges the land on which we gather is on the unceded traditional territory of the Comox First Nation and the traditional keepers of this land. So I'll call the meeting to order. Yeah, I don't need to hear myself again. The first item on the agenda are the meeting minutes from our meeting March 14th, 2023. Any questions? And if not, or any amendments? If not, if I could have a motion to move adoption of the minutes. Don't all jump in. Thank you. Seconded by. Yeah, thank you. Call the question. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thanks. The next item, as you can see, just a follow-up item, revised terms of reference. I'll let Derry speak to any questions about this, but the terms of reference of the TACPAC have been revised to permit TAC and PAC members to abstain from voting on matters that are of specific interest to the community and or where there's a perceived conflict with the TAC members' role as a regulatory body. Any questions about that? Do you want to offer any comment on how this came about?
Yeah, I think there were a number of decisions in past meetings where there was some concern around TAC members voting, and so we've amended the terms of reference to reflect that, and just kind of putting it out there to make sure everybody's okay with the proposed wording. Happy to accommodate any edits as needed, and then we'd be looking for kind of an adoption of the revised terms of reference.
Any questions? No, gives you a note. So if I could have somebody move the amendment then. Thank you. Roseanne, was that your hand? Thank you. A seconder? Yeah, thanks, Melanie. Any discussion? Call the question, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Perfect, thanks. And then the next item is just an overview of the public engagement, which Christiane is here to walk us through. Super interesting read from my point of view. So over to you, Christiane.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I think that I've met most of you, but I do see maybe one or two new faces. So my name is Christiane. My role on the project team is to support the public engagement and the First Nations consultation for this project. Oh, you're going to do it? Okay. Thanks, Vince. I'm going to start just with an overview with our public engagement efforts starting from 2021. So that was when we offered our first open house following the Sewage Commission's decision to accept Area A wastewater. And the subsequent work that was done to pursue a regional sewer solution was communicated to residents at that point. So from then on, the community has been very actively engaged in this project with high attendance at our in-person open houses and webinars. And our website traffic, the numbers here are from our newly launched engagement platform in May. So we've received quite a bit of traffic and active engagement on this page. I'll just direct your attention to that graph on the right-hand side, which speaks to website traffic sources. So you'll see that about 50% of the traffic to the new engagement platform is from website referrals. So the majority of that being from the CVRD website, which is where the public was trained to go in the past for information about this project. And then the next highest source being direct traffic. So that directly correlates to the direct mailouts that we've done, as well as the electronic communication to our 300 project followers. And I should mention as well, I'm just going to take questions throughout. So if any of you have any questions, just pop your hand up and we'll address them as we go along. Next slide, Vince. So I'm going to walk you next through the June engagements, which included 2 open houses and a webinar. And these were attended by the CVRD project team, consultants from WSP, Island Health, Comox First Nation Treaty Team representatives, elected officials, and many members of our PAC as well. So I'd just like to thank you for your representation at these events and your liaison with the community, because it is important and it does make a big difference in terms of being able to communicate this project to the community. So thanks for putting in that time. We had an informed goal for these events, and we look to talk to the community about the topics of phasing of the project, how the project would be funded, the estimated costs to individual homeowners, the design and location of the pump station, the wastewater collection systems, as well as the LWMP addendum process and the proposed timeline for the project. So those were the main topic areas that were covered. Next slide, please, Vince. So we heard about 13 key themes, and I'm just going to summarize the top 6 for you today, which were largely focused around timing and costs. We had a mixed response on these topics from the community, including in general, homeowners expressing concern about the cost implications, the affordability of the project. Residents who were in favor of moving the project ahead quickly as possible felt that the timelines that was just going to take too long, and they wanted us to move forward. And we had a number of residents come forward that were located in the future phases that were very interested in being added into phase 1A. And we heard from a number of residents who had recently installed new septic systems, and they were wanting to defer connection to the community system based on the cost and the investment that they had just made recently. So that feedback is from 4 sources. What we heard at the open houses directly, questions that we received during the webinar, feedback forms that were submitted both at the event and following the event through our engagement platform online, and follow-up phone and email interactions post-event with the project team. So we've taken all of this information. It's been compiled into what we heard report that's attached to your agenda today. And this will be included as part of the addendum that's submitted to the province early in the new year. Next slide, please. So overall, we're pleased with the level of participation in the community engagement sessions. We've had over 200 people attending the open houses and 43 joining the webinar, with a total of 46 feedback forms submitted, both online and in person. And we've had a high number of people view the webinar after the fact on YouTube. So just by comparison, these numbers in terms of attendance and engagement are very similar to the last open house and community engagement that we held for the Comox Valley Sewer Conveyance Project. But the difference being here that our outreach for that project was to about 8,000 households. And here we've reached out to 900 in Royston and Union Bay. So you can be assured that your community is very invested in this project. Next slide. So in the next week, we will distribute an electronic community update to the 300 project list subscribers that we have. This will include a high-level summary of this meeting today, a link to the What We Heard report, and news of upcoming open houses in January. And then in January, we'll plan to post a summary of the draft addendum online, and then mail invitations to over 900 households for the upcoming community events, excuse me, in Royston, Union Bay, and online. And that's where we'll present the information that you'll finalize here today as a group. And then in March, we'll share the What We Heard report for those upcoming events with the community, and include it as part of the final draft addendum that we'll submit to the province. And I'll just stop here for questions, because this concludes the public engagement portion, and then I'll spend time on the First Nations consultation update.
Any questions or comments at this point? We are going to have a roundtable afterwards. Your impressions, but any questions of Christiane about the process? Okay, carry on.
Next slide, please, Vince. Thanks. Okay, so we are continuing to engage Comox First Nation as a partner on this project, a nation with core territory and direct impact to its proposed treaty settlement lands. The province also requires through the LWMP that we engage with other nations that are identified in the consultative area database, which have overlapping traditional territory within the project boundaries. So these are the 14 nations that you see listed here. We've developed an engagement framework that has 3 main touch points. The first being introduction of the project. Last fall, we provided a summary document to these nations and sought guidance from each of them on whether or not there was an interest in the project and how they wish to engage with us. This past summer, we shared the information that was brought to the community in June through the open houses, as well as an update on the Comox Valley LWMP process and the next steps for provincial approval of the addendum that applies to the Sewer Extension South project. In January, we'll provide a summary of the draft addendum, and then the stage 3 report will also be shared as the 4th and final step in 2025. So to date, we've had 4 responses, and we currently have no outstanding questions or issues to be addressed at this time. We've responded to those questions that were addressed to us, and we've had no feedback from the remaining nations. However, there will be 2 additional opportunities for input with the draft addendum in the stage 3 report. And that is all for me.
Fantastic. Thanks, Christiane. What we wanted to do now was for those of you who were attended any of the open houses or to just offer comment on the consultation process itself. I think it's always really interesting to be present at those things. You get quite a different picture of what the conversations are and what the interest is from being there. So I think it would be really helpful for those that haven't attended to hear from some of those who have. For the people on Zoom, if you just want to raise your hand, if you want to offer some comment or observations about the consultations that you were party to. Man, you're a quiet group today. More coffee. More coffee is needed. Anybody on Zoom want to offer observations? They're also not had enough coffee. Christiane, it looks like you got a free pass.
I hope this means that everybody is happy and not just sleeping.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, we will. Sure.
I only managed to attend the first open house as I was on a plane going elsewhere for the second meeting. I felt there was a good, in general, there seemed to be a sort of positive feeling in the room. I only personally met one person, and he was so irrationally opposed. It was them, it was a sort of, these politicians driving things through, and it was impossible to have a rational debate with him because he was outraged. He didn't want to discuss it. He just wanted to be outraged. But apart from that, the interactions that I had, which was the meeting in Fallen Alders in Royston, was surprisingly positive, because I expected it to be a lot less positive than in fact it was.
Thanks for that. Anybody else? Please.
Yeah, I attended both of the outreach meetings at Fallen Alders and at Union Bay. Yeah, I was quite surprised. The general feeling was, people are, I wouldn't say they're happy about it, but they were kind of resigned to the fact that at some point this is going to have to happen. Of course, cost is always a big concern to everybody, and particularly now where everyone's seeing costs escalating like crazy. Union Bay, people are still recovering from you know, the $5 million water plant that the residents paid for with no grant funding, and the proposed increases that are coming up in the next 5 years there are also a factor. So, you know, cost was a big concern, but I think generally speaking, people that were there were kind of in favor of the project or resigned to the fact that it's going to happen sooner or later.
Thanks for that. Yeah, as I say, I think those sort of feelings that you get in a public meeting like that are really valuable, right? You get a sense of where the majority of people are at. Anybody on Zoom want to offer a comment? Anybody else? Okay, we will carry on. Great. I'll hand it over to Jerry to walk us through this next bit.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna walk through the draft addendum report at a really high level over the next few slides. So yeah, so just I guess as a bit of a refresher, as we know, a liquid waste management planning process is used by many local governments in BC to develop long-term plans for managing wastewater in their communities. And provincial approval of an LWMP gives local government the ability to borrow for projects included in the plan. As a forward-looking planning process, an LWMP can be particularly effective in areas like the CVRD's South region, where there may be considerable growth and development, or where there are known problems associated with existing infrastructure, such as aging septic systems. And the two primary objectives for LWMPs are to protect public health and the environment and to properly consult the public. So we've also shown this slide at past meetings, but I just wanted to present it again as a refresher on how this LWMP addendum process fits into the overall Comox Valley Sewerage Service liquid waste management planning process. So the purpose of the addendum is to include consideration of the South region and the Sewer Extension South project within the recently completed Comox Valley Sewage Service Stage 1 and 2 LWMP. And this is because of the expansion of the Comox Valley Sewage Service area in August 2022 to include Royston, Union Bay, and Comox lands. These processes, once we're completed the addendum, will then be combined for Stage 3, and the Sewer Extension South project will be further advanced in the Stage 3 plan. And the Stage 3 plan will then be submitted to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change Strategy for approval. So the draft addendum report is a summary of all of the information we've discussed over the last 4 meetings, along with an updated preliminary design for the collection systems, which WSP will review following this, as well as updated project cost estimates. The draft report is generally divided into 7 main sections, and I'm going to go through each of these briefly over the next several slides. I didn't include a slide on section 1 as it just provides an introduction to the plan and acknowledgements. So development of the addendum is following provincial LWMP guidelines, including the involvement of this committee, the TACPAC, consultation with First Nations and the public. Section 2 of the report includes a summary of PACTAC meetings to date, with all of our meeting minutes and materials attached as appendices. It also includes a summary of consultation with Comox First Nation and other First Nations with an interest in the plan area, as well as a summary of public consultation to date, which Christian has just provided an overview for us. And this section will generally be updated in the final draft addendum report to include a summary of the upcoming consultation activities in early 2024. So section 3 of the report provides the context upon which servicing plans for the South were developed. This includes much of the information discussed at our first PACTAC meeting back in September of 2022. including service area boundaries, population projections, along with a summary of CVRD land use bylaws in the area. So this section includes a brief discussion of guidelines for inflow and infiltration, which we have touched on in previous meetings, along with wastewater volume reduction, so things like water conservation and wastewater source control, which is essentially limiting or controlling what can be discharged into the sewer system. All of these items, with the exception of septic systems, are discussed in detail in the Stage 1 and 2 Comox Valley Sewer Service LWMP report. And so the addendum has really focused on just including some proactive policies and measures that may be implemented in the South region to ensure best management of infrastructure. This section also includes discussion of septic systems in the plan area, which we heard Island Health present on at our second meeting, along with commitments to explore development of a septic regulatory bylaw in the plan area. And Vince is going to discuss this in a little bit more detail later in the agenda. Section 5 is kind of the meat of the report. So it includes project design. It starts with a summary of sewer flows and organic load projections for the region, and a discussion of design considerations and engineering principles that were accounted for during development of the system configuration. It then describes the proposed project phasing and catchment area selection for neighborhood collection systems, which we've discussed in detail at past meetings, and then summarizes the preliminary design for the Sewer Extension South project, including the sewer force main, along with the pump stations and community collection systems for Phase 1A and 1B in the Royston, Kilmarnock, and Union Bay neighborhoods. Section 6 summarizes the draft Stage 1 environmental impact study that was completed by Current Environmental for Phase 1A, and which was presented to this committee in our third meeting. Current Environmental is also working on an update to the Stage 1 EIS to include the Phase 1B areas, and this update will be presented at the next TACPAC meeting and then included in the updated draft addendum report. The draft EIS, as we've heard, generally includes identification of environmentally sensitive areas in the project vicinity, a screening level review of existing contaminated sites information, as well as identification of potential adverse impacts to environmental, social, and cultural components resulting from construction and operation of the project, as well as recommended mitigation strategies. It also included a brief update on an archaeological overview assessment for the project area that was completed by Baseline Archaeological Services in 2015. And finally, Section 7 includes kind of the overall project cost impacts for Phase 1A and 1B of the project. Class C capital cost estimates were prepared for the different aspects of the Sewer Extension South design, and these estimates were updated as of last month in October 2023. The more detailed cost estimates for these project components are also provided in the appendices to the report. Also included in this section are estimates for cost escalation to midpoint of construction, as well as CVRD internal costs for land, legal, administration, and other costs that are not included in the October 23 Class C capital cost update. And then finally included in this section are updated Phase 1A property owner costs that we will look at in a little bit more detail later in the agenda. But essentially the main change here is a reduction in the estimated annual borrowing costs per property by about $200 per year. And this section also includes the policy statement adopted by this committee related to cost equity for future phases of the project. And that kind of concludes the overview, but I'm happy to take questions on any of those sections or the report in general.
Any questions? We are going to go through the collection system design update and the project cost update in some detail, but any questions about the overall report? Anybody on Zoom? Okay, we'll carry on. So far, so good.
There we go. This thing. That's all right. I'll tell you. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks for being here, and thanks for giving me the time to discuss this this portion of the work on the collection system. So the main purpose that we want to get out of this portion of the slide is, why is there changes in the design? Why do things happen? What can possibly impact this thing? This collection system, the force main, the pump station, all of that gets impacted, with the end purpose of this to look at why does it impact the costing. So once we can go first slide, next slide. All right, so on the left-hand side, you'll see the typical stages for the engineering process. We'll start off at the problem identification or the scope statement or whatever the client needs is at the first point. So we identified we need to do something. What is the high-level plans? Then we start at conceptual level. So on the conceptual design, we ask ourselves the question is this feasible? So then we look at, yes, we brainstorm, we figure out potential solutions. Then once we know this is feasible, this design can work, we carry on to the next phase, which is the preliminary design stage. And at the preliminary design stage, we get more information. We ask ourselves, is this design practical? So we use experience, we use some math, we use some modeling information, and then we get to a preliminary design model. So the conceptual design, once again, brainstorm ideas, lines on paper, where the preliminary stage is actually more of a design. We work through the numbers, we ran the models, see what we can get. Then this whole process will proceed to detailed design, and that is where we optimize the design. We get all the information. On the engineering, on a consultancy basis, that is where the majority of our fees would sit, because it takes a lot of time. That is about 40% of our fees sits in the detailed design, because we run models. We need surveys. We need so much more information to make sure this thing is practical, because if you don't do that at the right stage, then you go to the next stage, the implementation, documentation, and you get construction. And then if there's an error, that cost inflates considerably. So it's so important to make sure that those phases are. All right, so this is where we are in the process. We try to add this to the liquid waste management stage, and you'll see the lines doesn't line up 100%, and that's for a reason, because the liquid waste management stage 1 is kind of in the middle towards the end of the conceptual design phase. The preliminary stage 2 will be in the preliminary design phase. So this is where we are now with this process. And then the liquid waste management stage 3 is at the beginning of the detailed design phase. So it's not on the construction level drawings, but we get to the point where we have more detailed design and we go through a process and get more information to get that out. All right, next slide, please, Vince. All right, so when we looked at this model, we looked at very high level information. We looked at a Google Earth level type survey. We got the information. We make sure that, yes, what do we want to convey? We went through this whole process. We looked at the high level information. We, at the end of the day, we will go through some of just how the views changed, but we basically get the lines on paper. We show the pipelines, we have idea, we have experience, and we show that this is typically how it should look. Some of this information, when we sat in the office, is not easy to see all the statutory right of ways. So we assumed high level information, and some of the questions at the open house was, do we really need this right of way through my property? Because it's so now it's a negotiation, and that's why the CVRD asked us to say, well, can't we change this? Can't we go more to a road? And we tried our best. So we went through the exercise to reduce the statutory right of ways as much as we can. So there's not this discussion and negotiation of issue. You don't have to worry about the municipality need to get access to a pipe that's not specifically yours in your backyard. So we tried to move away out of that. And then once again, as we progressed to the preliminary design, we looked at the LiDAR. So we got more detailed information on the survey information. We got the environmental information. We did the actual run hydraulic models through the collection system. So we could very accurately or more accurately predict the depth of the pipes. We could look at the velocities, at the diameter of each section, and how it will impact all of these. Then we also ran, we had the value engineering process to say, well, isn't there some things that we can change that makes it better? That is it something that we missed? And we went through that process. And then as well with the public input, like the right of way, how to adapt this design. So all of that had an impact on the design itself. And every time we do that, it has a bit of a change to the costing side. So next slide, Vince. So if we just look at the Royston plan, the conceptual design on the left, once again, that is a high level. It's not, it's all of this is in that very thick document that Terry went through. It's just a 600-page document, so we expect everybody to read every single page of it. So get to that. So all of these drawings are in it, but it gives you an idea of where we started off. Once again, you assume the minimum diameter size. You assume some of the things. You looked at high level ground, and then we moved over to the preliminary design where we ran the model, so we can accurately predict at this point with the information we have the velocities, the pipe diameters, what is needed. So every time you get a up and down in a pipe, you need an air valve, for instance. You need more isolation valve, and that is very difficult to do on the conceptual design. Next slide there, Vince. So the same for the Union Bay. It's you assume some population in this area, or you count the number of properties, and you assume that flow is 150 millimeter diameter pipe, and you put that through, and you don't, once again, high level look at everything before we start developing this model. Next slide. So on the Kilmarnock, you'll see when we looked at that design, we already had enough information from Union Bay and from Royston that we could use that to quickly move to Kilmarnock. So that's why we didn't need to go through that high level conceptual. There was a high level one, but we quickly moved to the preliminary design because we had so much more information of this. So we can predict much more of the information, the pipe diameter, the LPS, all of that is visible. All right, so this is just an idea of how we get to this point, how the designs change. Because like I said, the more information you get, the more you update the design, the more accurate it is. So you don't want to get to a point in construction where you sit with the risk of having design errors, or because that is where it costs you. That's where the cost balloon very quickly. So that's where we started. So if we look at the costing side, so you'll see.
Ian, can we just take a pause there? Any questions at this point about this process, moving from one level of design to another? Yes, please, Jim.
Maybe this question's a bit early, but as you refined your design, to make your costing estimates, did you also look at an increase in, or what the impact would be on the residents by rejigging the collection system? Because we've already kind of put those numbers out there, the cost of the homeowner to connect to the collection system. And if the collection system is going to be rejigged and moved in some manner, did you look at what those cost changes might be? In other words, if the pipe's no longer in my backyard, it's now out here, is it going to cost the residents more money to hook up?
Yeah, so that is, we went through a long process of looking at the cost and the cost implication, not just on the capital side, but on the residents as well. And we did our best to reduce all of that, because you'll see on the previous map to this one, if we need to move out of a right of way, that will if we move out of the right of way and into the road, the residents, it shows now as a LPS, where otherwise would have been a gravity system, for instance. However, that costing does not take into account the negotiation with a client, and because in our eye level it's difficult to measure the impact on the resident for them, because how do you measure somebody coming into your yard on a monthly basis? So we want to rather reduce the nuisance of having people in your property if they need to visit, change a line, to break the line. So it's not as easy as just adding a cost to that. But once again, for the resident itself, we try to reduce the LPS by as much as we can. So we try to balance the depth of the pipelines with the LPS number. And that, so we tried to accommodate that as much as we could, Jim, for that.
Could you give us just an example of what that might have looked like somewhere on the map?
Vince, can we go back to Union Bay? I don't have my mouse in front of me, but I don't have a bigger map in front of me, but if we look at the top area, I don't have it pointed. Can I move to that side? So on these ones, you'll see there's a pipeline between the properties. So now it means that either side of the property will have to have a right of way negotiated. So that means if I say statutory right of way, it means lawyer cost. It means everybody needs to get involved and they need to be able to get access to it. The only reason why we did that at the conceptual level is now we can reduce the LPS for this potential. Remember, we did not look at that much at the levels at this point. We just assumed that nobody has very deep placement in this portion. So we assume that if we do it in between that we get reduce the LPS. So then we said, well, is that really worth it? And at the open house, the intention was, no, we don't want to discuss this. We don't want people in our property. Let's move it into the street. So we know we don't need lawyers to discuss the statutory right of way. But one side of the property will will be able to do it by gravity, and few of the houses on the other side. Once again, depending on your level. Yesterday I drove through this area and we showed a lot of these properties in the case, but there's a lot of them that really don't on the levels it look like it needs, but they can't tap into the system. So that is what we try to do.
Any other questions? Anybody on Zoom have any question? Okay. Here we go. Oh, sorry.
I just saw a comment from Andrew. Could you just summarize what you said? Because they couldn't hear you on Zoom when you were describing that.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Andrew. So what I said was, if we go between a portion of the houses, so there's just a property line between the houses, is not physically in a road. So if you just go on that property edge, you need to negotiate with either side of the property owners. They need access. They need we'll need to negotiate a statutory right of way. We need to have lawyers involved to discuss that. So that doesn't, as to add to Jim's question, that does not include in our capital costs, because my focus is more on the capital cost side. But even if we don't see that on the capital cost, now you might think that, well, the property owners will now need to have LPS. However, in the longer run, we don't need to negotiate with 10 or 20 properties, which is a longer cost, which is more of operational cost, but it also adds to the cost. It's just a bit more hidden away. Not hidden away, it's just structured differently. So that was it. Andrew, is that fine for you?
Right, super, thanks.
All right, Vince, let's go to the costing slide. First one. All right, so in engineering, this is basically how we get to our design cost. So at the strategic level, on the high level, on the scope statement side, you start off with plus minus 60%. You're not sure what you're going to get out. You have the plan. And the more information you get, then as we move to a class D, which we were with the collection system previously, is we have the idea and we try to get our funds plus minus 40%. So that is on the stage 1-ish side is where you get to that point. So once again, there's a lot of information, like we looked at the previous slide, there's a lot of information missing. So we try to get the information, we try to get the survey, the geotech, all of these information, the environmental assessment to make sure where we cannot go. Then we move down to a class C estimate, which is closer plus minus 30%. Once we get to that and the project goes ahead and you go to the detailed design, you can go down to plus minus 20 to 10%. And that is not typically the range where you predict construction costs. So that's how you try to angle this thing down to make sure you have all the information that you can. Next slide, please. So you'll see in this costing, there is some changes that happen in the design. It looked a bit different. So like I said, the information, we had additional information with the LiDAR. We ran the hydraulic modeling so we could determine the diameter of the pipes, the depth of the pipe, the amount of isolation valves, the service connection, all of that is needed. We could get that much more accurately. Then from the previous cost, that was close just to the end of COVID when we did the initial cost, we'll see the inflation went up and down, construction costs went up and down. Once again, the design update, we had some changes on the highway and the railway crossing. Then we had the public input, and then we made some assumptions previously, very conservative assumptions on imported fill, which we changed, and that will have an impact on the costing as well. Next slide, Vince. All right, so if we look at, for instance, the force main between for this whole section from north and so that's the area, that's the force main all the way through from Union Bay to Royston. However, that cost went down with about just over $4 million. And one of the reasons for that is we made conservative estimates. So that price went down. On the collection system, Kilmarnock went down, but all the others was higher because we had to do some changes. Once again, Kilmarnock was at a preliminary design and we refined that. The force main was at a preliminary design and we refined that even more. The collection system went from an conceptual design to a prelim design. So that's why there's some costing, and some of the areas changed, the neighborhoods changed. So it's very difficult at this thing to 100% compare apples to apples, because we had some areas change and we increase a few numbers and we decrease it at other points. So that's why there is some discrepancy, some changes on the costing of that. So that's Yeah, so we split up the Royston in S13 and the remainder, the Kilmarnock and then the Union Bay. Like I said, we have a lot of information on this. This whole detailed how it was set up is available in the setup. Do you want to? Yeah, you can. So yeah, so that is where there is change, and you'll see at the end the pump stations, because there's so many different permutation. I didn't put this on the slide because that will be dev by PowerPoint, but the pump station itself, it was close within the 5% up and down, depending on which option we chose, but the bulk of that was the same. So I think that is all my slides. Is there any questions on that? Okay, Jim.
Any questions? Yep, Jim.
I'm assuming the Union Bay part of the force main is included in the force main tab at the top. It just says Royston there, but some of that must be Union Bay's force
No,
main.
it's sorry, that must be all the way from Union Bay, the whole 14. There's no extra cost on that. That's the total cost of the force main.
Thanks.
Apologies for that, Jim.
Any other questions? Anybody on Zoom? Yeah, Tabitha.
Question for I don't know what. So these costs and I said maybe this is a question that we'll address later, but so if the I'm not going to add this up in my head right now, but if the cost goes up or down, like how is that going to come? I'm assuming the grant is fixed, so that'll be affected by the borrowing costs, and then the residents will pay that or save that difference, whatever, if it went up or down. I can't tell instantly.
Gary?
Yeah, so we've got a slide coming up on kind of the impact to the resident costs, but generally, you know, we have seen a slight increase in overall project costs, but we've also seen an increase in grant funds allocated to the project. So that all kind of gets combined to, to change the cost per property.
Any other questions? Okay, carry on. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, over to Derry.
Yeah, we're certainly moving through the agenda a lot quicker than we had anticipated. So we can start this next section, I guess now, or we could have a break, which feels a little early, but
I think it's
certainly.
a little early. I think
Okay.
we should carry on. unless others.
Okay.
Ryan, do you want a paper agenda? We do have some over there. Do you want? Okay.
All right. So next slide, Vince, please. Yeah. So this is the resident cost table that is presented in the draft addendum for phase 1A property owners. It essentially summarizes the one-time costs, which we've discussed previously, as well as the annual cost of the project for those in phase 1A. The one-time cost estimates haven't changed from those previously communicated. However, we have included possible LPS equipment in the one-time cost range in this table, where it was previously just noted as not being included. For the estimated annual costs, as I just noted, we have seen an overall reduction in borrowing costs by around $200 per year from previously $1,400 to $1,700 a year, and down to $1,200 to $1,500 a year. Like I just said, well, the updated total project costs are similar, but have slightly increased from those previously presented. We have gone ahead and allocated the additional $3.6 million in critical community infrastructure program funding that was previously being held in reserve until project costs were updated. And an additional $1.25 million in community works funds has been allocated to the project by the CBRD board in May of this year. And so all of these kind of things combined have resulted in that overall decrease in property owner costs. Any questions, comments, concerns about the cost update, the way it's presented in the report, more information needed?
Do you recall which page this is on in the report? Because when I was looking at the costs, I don't recall seeing this specific table.
So it's table 12 on page 55. It looks slightly different because we didn't include the previous estimates, so it's just the updated estimates in that table.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Any questions of anybody on Zoom? Okay.
So we have also included a staff report that had been recently presented to our Electoral Area Services Committee, and that committee had referred that report to this TACPAC committee for consideration. So Mark's just going to present on a few slides on the content of that staff report.
Great, thanks, Terry. And we do seem to be going really quickly today. So if there's if people are still mulling over the last slide or any of the previous stuff, just let us know. We can go back and spend a bit more time on things. And if you happen to formulate questions about previous slides while I'm talking, then we're happy to go back and go over that. All right, so after Derry's good news about lower costs, this staff report tries to present a bit more of a holistic picture about costs for the South. So, at these meetings here, we're talking about the South Sewer project. We're really focusing in on just that project and the costs associated with that project. But there's a lot more going on in the regional district. And there's especially a lot happening in the South right now in Royston and Union Bay. And there are other cost pressures. So we wanted to, provide the elected officials with a bit more of a holistic view of what the cost pressures are in the South. And this really helps them in their decision-making process about considering new services or enhanced services or just, the required maintenance and upgrading of services. So earlier this year, our finance department put together a staff report to kind of total up all of the different things that are happening. Some of these cost pressures, just some of the highlights here are, of course, the sewer extension south, big impact for the residents that are affected and included. We also have another project called the Water Extension South or Water South Extension, and it's bringing water from Comox Lake down to Comox First Nation treaty settlement lands. That's the primary purpose of that project. But on its way, it's also an opportunity for Royston to be supplied water from Comox Lake instead of from the village of Cumberland. And that's a goal of the village, is to get Royston off of that system so that they can continue to, provide the community of Cumberland with water as it grows. So there's a project there that has an impact on Royston, but not Union Bay. Recreation facilities, the regional district has, all of the regional district participates in the rec service. Our rec facilities are quite old, built in the 70s and thereabouts. So there's some major refurbishment required there, but that impacts all taxpayers, right? In the regional district. In Royston, there's the potential for enhanced garbage collection, and that's coming about, to increase provide improved service, but also as garbage collectors are moving towards automated trucks with automated bins, they're more expensive and the service is increasing in cost. So that's not a huge impact, but it all adds up. The next one is water rate increases. So this is a significant one. We've done a lot of work just lately on the water systems in Royston, Union Bay, and then 2 of our other systems in Black Creek and in the Comox Valley. And this work is asset management focused work, but it's showing that in the next 15 to 20 years, there's a big cycle of replacements and renewals that are required, and we don't have the money saved up to do that. So there are rate increases projected to start saving up for what's coming in the water services. And then that does apply to both Royston and Union Bay, and you'll see that on the next slides. And then fire hall improvements, not so much for Royston, but in Union Bay, the fire hall is quite old, it's in poor condition, and a new fire hall is planned. A lot of these projects are supported by grant funding, but there's still also a resident component to the funding for them. One of the complications is that not all of these things apply to all residents. So it really depends on where you fit in. So next slide, please, Vince. Oh, just go back one. Yeah. Okay. So the analysis that finance completed was based on the best information that they had at the time that they did the analysis. And as Ian just demonstrated, things change as projects evolve, but it is based on the information that we had. For South Sewer, we used the Class D estimate. So I will point out that that's already reduced a little bit from what's been included in this staff report. And we've actually highlighted that on the slide coming up. For the Water South extension, we're using costs that we determined back in the spring of 23. The one-time connection cost. So for those residents that have a grinder pump, or they have a higher connection cost because of a long driveway or a long distance to the new collection system, those costs are not included in this analysis. Water rates are from an October 2023 report. And these costs are calculated based on a single family residential property. So we chose a property with a certain value, and then these numbers are based on that. So they won't match up exactly to your tax numbers. Just depends on the value of your property. Next slide, please.
Could I say something about
Yes.
that? Because the range of house values that were listed was 500 to 800,000.
Yeah.
I think we all know that that's no longer relevant range.
Yeah. So the costs are based on 800,000. The 500 was, if in that table it showed, I think it started in 2020. So that was the value that we were using then. But the numbers that I'm going to show here coming up on the next slide are from 2023, and we used 800,000. And then same with 2027, I think we used 800,000.
Okay, even 800 these days is low.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. You can extrapolate to the higher amount. It is pretty linear in that way, at least for the taxation part. But yeah, thank you.
Mark, did you choose 800,000 because it was a mean
Yeah, I think
number, or how did
sorry,
how did you get to
yeah,
that
I'd have to
800,000?
check with finance, but I think that's right. I think from the from assessment, BC assessment, that is the average across the entire area. But it, in Royston or in Union Bay, it could be different and slightly higher. Next slide, please, Vince. It's got a table here with a whole bunch of figures, but really it's the totals I think that probably want to focus in on. So the top part of this table is 2023 parcel tax and user rates for Royston and Union Bay. So 2170 is the current total for Royston, and 30 I'm having a bit of a hard time seeing it, 3132 for Union Bay. The big difference is fire service and water service. So Royston has a very low fire service cost. Their fire protection services are from the city of Courtenay. They don't have a hall, they don't have their own trucks, they don't have their own employees. And then water, Union Bay has higher water rates. As Jim referenced earlier, there's a brand new water treatment plant that's being paid for. And so higher parcel tax and user fee already exist in Union Bay. So that's the sort of current situation, 2023. And then in 2027, we're just projecting our best estimate of how things are changing. And you can see, in 4 years there, pretty significant increase without the South Sewer project included. So this table does not include the South Sewer project. So it just gives you an idea of how other things are changing. And it's the water service and the fire service that are really driving most of those changes. For Royston, the water extension south is also a big driver. Jim, do you have a question?
What is unique services tax? Is that the fire or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's for Royston, it's for Royston and Union Bay, it's fire. In the staff report, if you're interested, it's included in the agenda. The appendices include how these numbers are developed, right? So there's an appendix for the combined services and then for the unique services for each one. So all of the details are there for each service. And then once we add in the South Sewer, if you could just go to the next one, Vince. So here we've added in the parcel tax for South Sewer, which is the same for Royston Union Bay, and also the user rate, same. But you can see, it's a big impact, right? And the 1,700 is boxed in red there because it has been slightly reduced, as Derry just presented. But when this report was put together back in October, we were still using the higher amount. So it gives you a bit of a picture of the full impact for the areas. It's really good information for the decision makers as they contemplate each of these changes. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions? Comments? Yep, Jim.
A question, I know this is more of a sewer meeting than a water meeting, but because we're talking about the tax implications, I noticed the letter I received from CVRD outlining the increase in water rates. We're talking about replacement and renewal, but I'm suspecting that lines will be upsized as well for future development. And I didn't see anything that referenced an increase in the capital improvement cost charges, which really in my mind should be where those costs are borne for upsizing of any lines. That shouldn't fall upon the existing residents, but more so on future development.
Yeah, agreed, Jim. And if not in the letter, and in our staff report, we definitely do make that statement that any upsizing is not borne by those increases to residents, but by developer costs through development cost charges. Yeah, I remember seeing that in the staff reports.
Any other questions or comments? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is an appropriate time, but in some senses, with regard to the South Sewer project, the elephant in the room seems to me to be Union Bay Estates, that always seems to be absent in the discussions. And I guess what concerns me is, and I'll choose some highly sort of hypothetical numbers. Let's assume there are 1,000 residents being hooked up to the sewer system, and it costs each resident $6,000. That's presumably the $6 million is the shortfall between the grant money and what it's going to cost. Now, in some future period, what if 200 houses are added to that sewer system? They will presumably be charged a connection fee that will presumably be perhaps $6,000. That subsequent connection fee, where's it going to go? Is it going to go into general revenues for the CVRD? Because strictly it should come back to the residents who paid for the project in the first place. And it could be a considerable amount of money if it's, you know, if we move from 1,000 residents to 1,200, that's a 20% increase in the number of residents. Therefore, in principle, we should be reimbursed for 20% of the connection costs. Do you understand where I'm coming from?
Yeah. So are you speaking for the collection system or the forced main or all of the infrastructure?
All of the infrastructure. The fact that if residents connect, let's say new development connects after the system is complete, they will presumably be charged a considerable collection fee. But that collection fee, as far as I can see, should come back to the residents who've already paid for the system. I suspect that money will just disappear into general revenue. And if that's so, I think it's unfair.
Well, it won't disappear into general revenue because mostly because of the structure of regional districts. So they're structured by service. So, you know, a new service will be created for the collection network that's installed. And that service would receive the revenue and it would always stay within that service. So it won't go anywhere else. So once the network is built, so there's a collection network built in Union Bay, and there's a home connected to that network that was not previously there, they will begin to pay the user rate charge, and that revenue will go to pay for the debt associated with the installation of that system in the first place. So in that way, they'll participate and pay for the service. And if they don't, you know, they might not join for 10 years, well, they haven't paid for the first part, but they'll pay for the remaining 15 years of that debt, right? So they do participate in that way. If there's a whole new neighborhood that doesn't have a collection system installed, well, that new neighborhood will be going through the same process as this project, right? There'll be a new system required, new costs required, new service area added or required. So I don't think I'm doing a great job of answering the question, but I think it is like anyone that connects to the system will be paying the user rate and parcel tax that's in place, even for the initial residents.
I think the important point here is that just because of the way regional district systems are structured, as you said, Mark, that the finances are siloed. So any monies collected associated with this project stays in the silo of this project, right? It doesn't go into something else. So in that way, all the funds are contained and there's a mutual benefit when, you know, a new property comes in. So general revenue is not an option for
okay,
service.
that's general revenue is the wrong word, but it does seem to me that there would be a fairness if that money that late adopters, and let's call them late adopters, don't put into the silo, that money should come back to the early adopters. There somehow seems to be a lack of fairness that in some senses we're subsidizing late arrivers on the scene. If they had arrived earlier, costs per household would have been less. I guess that's what I'm saying. The fact that they're arriving late means that it costs the rest of us more.
And that's only if you assume that the system doesn't need to be any bigger, the initial system, right? So so if you could attract 100 more residents initially for no additional cost to the system, then yes, but if the system needs to change or there needs to be additional pipes to extend to those 100 properties, then that will drive the cost also.
I'm sorry, I don't want to belabor, but of course the system is designed for considerable expansion in to include Union Bay Estates and First Nations land.
The conveyance system,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, and so maybe that's, I guess we're talking about two different things potentially. So what Mark was talking about was the collection system infrastructure and the borrowing related to that service. So if there's a new property created within that service area, that property would then share in the borrowing costs that service has acquired. And, you know, if there's significant new properties, the borrowing costs for everybody would go down because there's more users sharing in that cost. For the conveyance system, so the force main and the pump stations, things are a little bit different. So new properties will pay a development cost charge to go towards kind of the new infrastructure or upsizing required to accommodate that new development. Also, when we're talking about kind of the cost estimates for phase 1A, I think as we've communicated previously, with the combination of grant funds and project partner contributions, there's actually going to be little to no borrowing required from existing property owners towards that component of the system. So really, property owners are paying for the construction and the installation of the collection systems within their own neighborhoods.
I have a question from Andrew. He's just asking, and I think you've just addressed it, Jerry. Will there be development cost charges for new development? And I think I heard you say, yes, there will be.
Also, are these numbers based on mandatory hookup? What if households decide not to hook up? Have we addressed that? Has the staff addressed what they want to do with mandatory connections? Or
Yeah, so all properties within the proposed service area will be required to hook up to the system. Although we did discuss a deferral program option for those with new septic systems, and Vince is going to talk a little bit more detail about that later.
I have a question. I think I know the answer, but if miraculously all the borrowing costs, the capital costs were paid, like if I win 100 million, I'll probably build a sewer system. But do the property taxes ever go down once the debt is paid off? Like, I understand operating costs, but in theory, if the debt is paid off, then the property tax portion should disappear.
Yes, it will. So that 1,700 that's shown there is for 25 years. Once the debt is retired, then that payment will be gone. I just hesitated to say it's only going to be 5,500 for 25 years, but that is the case, though, Jim. You're right. It's that parcel tax is specifically there to pay off the debt, and once that debt is retired, then it's gone for that purpose, right? If some other new debt was taken on for some other thing, then but it's specifically tied to the South Sewer project, and when that debt is paid off, then that parcel tax is gone.
Any other questions? I mean, these are good to get these questions out now, I would say,
I'm going to go back to the assessed value issue that I brought up earlier and just ask that we could, I mean, you said it was linear and we can extrapolate, but it would be nice to see maybe a wider range so that we could get better numbers for houses that are worth over $1 million, which is the majority in our neighborhood, at least. I mean, some of them are 2 million. So then I think if my math is good, we're looking at, taxes up into the 15 to 20,000 range for some of that.
Yeah, the user rates side would not change, but yeah, we can do that. So what instead of throwing numbers out, we can get back to you with some different ranges. I think the accounting department has all the work done here, so they can change the
And
value.
some of the costs in the table are parcel taxes, so kind of the same charge for each property, whereas some are based on the value of the property.
Right,
So-
thank you, Derry. Yeah, that's another consideration.
Yes, I am aware of that. It's just that the initial number given is not a number I've seen on anyone's taxes in the last few years, like that 3,000.
Anything else? Okay. Should take a quick break. 10 minutes, okay with everybody? We'll come back at past. Thank you. So just before we turn this over to Vince, I just wanted to go back to the previous discussion and you know, clearly this is an important part of all the work that's been done to date and moving forward. So I just wanted to ask again if there are any other comments or questions about this. We, as Mark said, we can come back to the things that we've dealt with earlier in the meeting if you know, if we need to, but I just wanted to take a pause here and see if there's any other comments or questions about that. Okay, hearing none, I'll hand it over to Vince.
Bear with me a second, I'm just gonna get the slide deck going again.
Sorry about that. I just threw you right off.
Too many things on my screen, I can't get to the menu.
Sorry about that.
There we go. From current, there. Okay, yeah, thank you, Allison. Yeah, so this I'm going to talk about the discussion paper number 1 that was included with the agenda, and the main purpose of this discussion paper was to kind of pick up where Ian left off in describing the changes in the collection system design between the conceptual design that was presented at the public open houses in June and the updated preliminary design that Ian discussed. And really, yeah, what it comes down to is, you know, as Ian alluded to, the difference in the statutory rights of way required. As Ian noted, there's legal costs associated with acquiring those, as well as survey costs and compensation costs to property owners for the use of that property and to potentially even restore what was there before the property was dug up to install sewer pipes. So what the table here on the screen really kind of summarizes is it just puts some numbers to what those differences look like. As you can see, for the conceptual design for private property crossings, there were a considerable number of private property crossings, approximately 43 in the Royston area, plus 64 in the Union Bay area. So that's a fair bit of effort in order to secure statutory rights of way over that quantity of properties in order to be able to proceed with installing public sewer infrastructure in those areas. So with the move to keeping the collection piping within the road network for the preliminary design, you can see that those numbers of SRWs have come down considerably. Now we're looking at approximately 4 in the Royston area and 4 in the Union Bay area. But on the flip side, what this does result in is it does result in an increased number of approximate LPS connections. We had previously we had about 20 properties in Royston that we were thinking would be required to connect via LPS, and about 44 in Union Bay. That was primarily those properties along the shoreline between the highway and the shore in Union Bay. Now with the preliminary design and the move to keeping the piping network in the road right away, those numbers have increased. Although just speaking with Ian a little bit offline, they have had a look at the area, and these numbers are probably on the conservative side. Once we get into detailed design and actually do a proper topographic survey in those areas, then we'll have a better understanding of grades and how deep the pipes are in relation to people's service connections, and that will really refine those numbers as we get further along in the design process. So yeah, that was the main purpose of this discussion paper, was really just to tease out these differences, just to make it clear what that difference in direction means. So be happy to answer any questions or
Questions? Anybody on Zoom, any questions? Yeah, Tabitha.
This might have been in one of the reports. I tried to look, but couldn't. It probably was in there. What is there a map showing which, like, what the 20 were and what the 88 are, or the 43 and the 4, like those, or 111? Yeah, what the two changes are, so we can, our neighbors are like, oh, am I one of those people?
I can bring up a map that shows the preliminary design where the anticipated updated LPS connections are, but really it is still very preliminary at this point in time.
It's too soon. Got it. That's fine.
And we will be sharing this information at the public open houses as well, so people will be able to see the updated maps and whether their property is anticipated to be an LPS connection. So.
Yeah.
A few meetings ago, maybe first or second meeting, when we voted on LPS being included, I may have some regrets about how I voted, and it was very close. And I'm wondering if anyone else, I'm wondering, A, are we allowed to revisit that? And B, if anyone else feels the same way or not.
Others? Do you want to expand on your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, taking the holistic picture of the numerous tax increases that we're seeing coming in the next 3 to 4 years, I would like to revisit the idea of including the LPS systems for some of the homeowners who are affected, simply because in the context of all of the charges coming, I feel like that's the one place where we could have an impact, like a big positive impact that may have been a missed opportunity. And then back several meetings ago, I wasn't aware of the full picture.
Vince or Derry, do you want to just give us some information though about how reducing those statutory right-of-ways has affected costs, and that sort of versus the LPS? Is there some way to talk about those things together?
Yeah, I think we haven't done the complete analysis to really quantify the total cost of acquiring the SRWs. But in speaking with staff involved in other CVRE projects, those costs can be considerable. We're talking, perhaps like 50% of the actual land value of that part of the SRW. So adding that up would add to the cost of the project, and then the knock-on effect of that would be an increase to the borrowing costs for the project, and then that would increase the parcel tax for everybody that's being connected in part of phase 1A.
Yeah, I'm not concerned about the right of ways, just the LPS systems that we voted on. Yeah, that was a close vote that I have more information now, so I'm just putting it out there that I would maybe like to revise my particular vote, which may have been the deciding factor. So
sorry, just so I'm clear, so it's not the cost of the LPS system that you're worried about, it's something more practical than that?
We were offered the opportunity to have those included for our neighbors from the CVRD. They were talking about maintaining a stock of them and providing them at no cost to the impacted properties. And now there's, first of all, substantially more properties, it looks like, that might need those. And many more costs outside of the sewer project that are coming to the property owners. So in view of all of that information. Yeah, at the time I wasn't sure how I felt anyway, and now I feel more strongly. So yeah, if other people who voted on it also felt that way, it would be something that I would like to reconsider.
Any other comments from anybody in the room or on Zoom about that?
Is the cost, is it negligible, these changes? Like, you know, the increase in LPS systems versus the right of ways changing the alignment? You know, does it really, is it a big number? Or is it hard to decipher right now?
Well, I think, I guess the table here illustrates the difference in the number of SRWs and the number of LPS connections. So that would be the best estimate we have at this time in terms of quantifying what the change in design direction between the conceptual and preliminary design means.
I'm not proposing a design change. I'm simply wanting to revisit the vote that we had about the LPS systems. Yeah, nothing to do with the right of way.
And so I guess just so I understand, Roseanne, what you're potentially suggesting is to include the cost of those grinder pumps within the project costs. So therefore, everybody within the collection system service area would be sharing in those costs as opposed to them being individual homeowner costs.
Yeah, like the proposal that we were offered based on Ian's fairness theory from last year. But it doesn't look like we have any support from the committee. So if that's the case, that's fine. It can be my own individual feeling.
I don't see any other speakers at the moment, but again, we can come back to this if you have second thoughts. Okay, Vince.
Okay, thank you. I'll move along to discussion paper number 2. This is in regard to other questions we received at the June open house events related to service area and phasing boundaries, with some property owners expressing interest in boundary expansions or phasing changes. So the discussion paper describes 5 of these requests in the Royston area as shown on the map below, or the map on the screen. The first 2 listed on Highland Road and Royston Road, these would be an expansion of the phase 1B area, and the WSP has provided cost estimates for those as shown in the table below the map. For the next 2, a property on Hayward Avenue and properties on Marine Drive at the western edge of Royston. The properties in question here would be able to connect to already proposed phase 1A infrastructure via LPS connections. And then the 5th request, this would see 7 properties along Highway 19A, kind of on the eastern edge of Royston, be moved from phase 1B to phase 1A. And there's a cost estimate for that shown in the table below the map on the screen. Additional to these 5 Royston requests, we've also been approached by the Kingfisher Resort and Spa that has expressed interest in connecting in an earlier project phase. So in the discussion paper, the table on page 3 includes some considerations for these requests. And as cost is one of the primary public concerns regarding the project, a suggested approach is to consider these change requests where they can be made with little to no overall increase in per property costs for everybody else. So happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Yeah, Jim?
Yeah, I think if you can expand the system and get more users with little to no change in the overall cost implications, it's something the committee should seriously consider. The more the merrier in some ways. If it's not going to really impact the overall costs, it should certainly help in funding the system as we go on and as the system ages.
Other comments or thoughts? Any agreement about that?
Sorry.
Yeah, please. Ken.
I'm presuming that we had a discussion about Royston School and its challenges, and that was never fully resolved. Presumably, moving up to Area 2 solves the school board's problem.
Yeah, so the Royston School is in the existing catchment for the service area. It's just been designated as a phase 1B connection as opposed to phase 1A. However, we are still in discussions with the school district, as we kind of progress the design and really get a better understanding of the cost to connect the school as to whether or not they may be able to be serviced in the first phase. The properties highlighted in kind of the area designated as number 2 are actually outside of the existing proposed service area. So that change would be kind of a change to the phase 1B boundary to extend the pipe up Royston Road to be able to include those properties within the service boundary.
So Derry, if I understand then what you've just said, that all of these properties would go into phase 1B. Is that right?
That's what's being, proposed at this time. Yeah.
Subject to the cost of doing that.
That's right. Yeah. So if the committee's kind of amenable to extending the boundary, if there's kind of minimal cost impact to the overall project, then staff would approach those property owners to have more detailed discussions about potentially including them within the phase 1B service area boundary.
Yeah, I agree with Jim that, if there's property owners that want to join in the early stages and the costs are minimal, we should support that.
Any other thoughts on that? Anybody on Zoom? Can I take it from that then that there is general support to continue to go down this road? Okay, I see nodding heads. And I assume if you're on Zoom, you'll tell me if that's not consistent with your thinking. Okay. Back to you, Vince.
Hey, I think this next slide here was just to give the committee another chance to consider the project design changes in the draft addendum report from what's been previously presented to this committee. We've already talked a fair bit about the collection system changes. There are some potential changes on the Royston pump station subsequent to the last committee meeting in March. The Royston, WSP did some more work looking at options on the Royston pump station to improve its resiliency to coastal flood events. So one of the appendices to the report includes WSP's memo on flood mitigation options for the Royston pump station. And then the other thing that was looked at was an alternate alignment for the force main using a portion of the ENN rail corridor instead of completely running the force main along Highway 19A. At this point, for the force main, the estimates provided are for an alignment along 19A, but the addendum report does speak to the potential use where it is advantageous to align or to use the ENN corridor for a portion as we get into detailed design.
Yeah, so maybe what we can do, I'm just wondering, Vince, are you able to easily go to the next steps slide? Because maybe we can just talk about where the process is going and then we'll come back to this slide. Just so that you know kind of where the decision making is headed. So Derry or Vince, I'm just wondering if you can just walk through this and then we'll go back to that summary of what we've reviewed today and ask questions.
Yep. So in early December, we will be presenting the draft addendum report to both the LWMP Addendum Steering Committee, which is the Electoral Area Services Committee with the addition of the Chair of the Sewage Commission, along with the Comox Valley Sewer Service LWMP Steering Committee, which is the Sewage Commission, along with the addition of the Electoral Area A representative. So with the draft addendum report, we will also be providing the committees with kind of a summary of this meeting and kind of any feedback that the committee provides to us today and I guess in the coming week on the report itself. At that meeting, we will also be asking the steering committees for support to move forward with our next round of public engagement. And if there's agreement, we will move forward with some public open houses in January, using a really similar format to what we've used before last spring. So an open house in Union Bay, an open house in Royston, along with an online webinar. And we'll be presenting the updated preliminary design for the collection systems, along with the draft addendum report, updated cost estimates, and any other changes at those open houses. Then we'll be taking kind of all of the feedback received from the public, along with this committee and the steering committee, and using that feedback to revise the draft addendum report. Which will then be presented again to this committee in its revised form, likely in March or April. And at that time, we'll be asking for kind of formal approval adoption of the report, which will then also go to both steering committees and then to the CBRD board before being presented to the province for consideration.
So that's the big picture. So what we're discussing today, the draft addendum report, is going to go forward in December to those committees for consideration. So what I think the question that we're asking today of the TACPAC is if you have any concerns, if you're comfortable with the report in its draft form headed to the committees from TACPAC at this point. Don't necessarily need a motion. We could have one, but mostly if you have concerns or issues, now's the time to discuss those. Yeah, Tabitha.
I had two questions. One, can you, again, I'm sure it was in there and I'm too many informations, I forgot. Can you remind what like once you send it to the province, what that is, that a 6-month or 1-year timeline, and then when the estimated construction start date is? Like, obviously it's very rough, but
Yeah, so Melanie can correct me if I'm wrong, but we're estimating the provincial review time for the addendum to be around 6 months at this point in time. Once the addendum has been reviewed by the province and we receive feedback, we can then revise it accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
And then the addendum will kind of be, I guess, attached to the stage 1-2 plan that's already been developed for the core area. And then we'll proceed into the stage 3 planning process, where we'll kind of continue with more detailed design work for the sewer extension south, along with updated cost estimates that will then kind of go through a similar public review process before kind of the complete report is presented to the province for final approval. Yeah.
So if all goes well, I know it's like tempting fate, isn't it? The report would come from the CVRD to the province in the spring of 2024. They would consider it probably late 2024. Come back, be part of the bigger liquid waste management plan, and go back. So when do you think final approval would, like, you're good to go kind of message? When would that happen? 2025?
Yeah, I think at this time we're estimating submitting the stage 3 plan to the province for consideration in I guess summer, fall 2025. So then depending on kind of the review process and when we receive that approval, that would be when we'd kind of start with kind of tendering the project and the construction process.
My other question is, I saw in the report, and I can't remember where I saw it, but there was some, and Vince kind of mentioned some changes to the potential changes for flooding to the Royston pump station, and it looked like there was 3 options. I don't know, I thought we were going to discuss that, but maybe not, or get that verbally so I can understand it better.
Yeah, I think we talked about it a little bit at the last meeting as well, but essentially all 3 options at this point have been included in the draft addendum report as options. And certainly our thought was that we'd continue to explore those options as we move into detailed design, as we get a better idea of costs and impacts, and then kind of have those discussions at that point in time. But if there's direction from the committee in terms of preference at this point in time, we'd certainly take that feedback. Thanks. Yep.
I'm wondering at this time if there's anything you can share with us in regard to the partner funding contributions. Has there been progress, a timeline when it might be expected that we can have that finalized, because we're all doing a lot of work here, but I think we all know without the partner contributions, this is going to be a no-go. So perhaps Mark can fill us in, or somebody could fill us in if possible.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Yeah, it's hard to talk about. I wish we could be more transparent and just, to discuss it more openly, but these are, unfortunately, they're confidential negotiations, but just to try to explain the structure that they're working on a little bit, and hopefully I don't go too far, and Gary, just give me the hook if I am going too far. But the partnership contributions are to support the conveyance pipe. So the partners that we're working with, and we're working with Comox First Nation and Union Bay Estates as partners. And that partnership is really focused on providing funding towards the conveyance pipe. And that's because the conveyance pipe not only serves Royston and Union Bay, but also Union Bay Estates development for their long-term sewer solution, and Comox First Nation for their aspirations for treaty settlement land in the area. In general, the partnership is kind of 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. There's also grant funding being applied to the force main. But the grant funding is really there to support the residents and Comox First Nation. The private developer is funding their entire portion. And then on top of that, the developer is also providing an amenity, which we're trying to make equivalent to the amenity that was always included in the MDA. And although there was no dollar value attached to that MDA, we're trying to determine what that is. So, it doesn't really answer your questions about like how much and, how firm and everything else, but that's, generally what the structure of things look like. And those discussions are going well. For Union Bay Estates, I can say that they understand this is the best long-term solution. They are in full support of this project as a long-term solution, and they're coming to the table with significant, partnership contribution. So, we feel like that discussion is going well. I think we're getting closer to being at the end of it, and I hope we can be more transparent in the future. And same with Comox First Nation. They also understand this is critical to their economic development opportunities for the area, and they're really fully on board with this project. But they have their own complicated treaty process to go through. So, things are happening. I think it's going well, Jim. that's, you know, that's all I can really share.
Do you have a timeline in mind yourself when you'd like to conclude this? Obviously, the sooner the better, but you know, as this project keeps rolling forward, what would you think would be a reasonable timeline to have these commitments?
Yeah, I think in 2025, we're going to want to have these commitments nailed down. So especially with Union Bay Estates, I'd say 2024. So next year. So 2024, or fairly early in the year, I think we'll be in a position to have something worked out with Union Bay Estates. A little bit longer for Comox First Nation because they have their own process to go through and their own timeline on that process, but it's expected to also complete in 2024. And yeah, so that's what we're hoping for.
Good questions. Anything else you want to bring forward now? So can I conclude then? I do see one raised hand from iPhone on, that must be Director Arbour. Director Arbour, go ahead. Except for that you're muted. There you go.
Yeah, thanks. And I joined about 45 minutes ago, so really happy to hear the discussion, and thanks again to all the volunteers who are sitting on this committee, doing the important work. Yeah, I thought I would just add to Mark and to Jim that indeed it's very important to gain security and certainty as we move along this process. And I guess the big news 6 months ago was the provincial contribution that was solidified. And definitely when I communicate with the two partners, in case of Comox First Nation, it's really wrapped up in their overall treaty process, as Mark explained, and with Union Bay Estates, I think they recognize that we need to get there, and I like to hear Mark saying, you know, in 2024 before we conclude this process. And then I would add to that I still haven't given up on thinking about other ways to fund the project. I'm hearing and I understand the concerns around overall cost increase. I'm glad that report was there today. So I think there's still, in my view, opportunities to explore how we continue to bring resources to the project. Thanks.
Thanks, Director Arbour. Any other comments from anybody on Zoom or in the room? Then can I conclude that you're comfortable with the addendum report going forward as is to the next committees? And we'll move it forward with that understanding. Okay, so then we'll go to our updates.
Okay, yeah, this is a couple of septic related updates. First, a bit more on the septic deferral program that was previously presented at the March TACPAC meeting. As presented, this proposed program would allow eligible property owners to defer connection to the sewer system. At the May 2023 steering committee meeting, a recommendation to develop a program to defer sewer operating costs for up to 5 years was approved. So the proposed eligibility for this program includes properties with type 2 or 3 systems that would be less than 5 years old at the date of required sewer connection. Picking up on Tabitha's question there, according to the current project schedule, this could be sometime in 2028 for phase 1A. Proposed eligible deferral costs would include sewer operating costs. These are estimated at around $600 per year, as well as any of the private property costs related to septic decommissioning and connecting from the home to the service connection at the property line. And the total deferral time is proposed to be 5 years, or until the property that is part of the deferral program changes hands, is sold. So just, yeah, if anyone has any questions on that or suggestions, that would be great.
The 2028 date, that's like installation phase for 1A, is that what so then Is that what I'm understanding about this information?
Yeah, we're estimating that's probably around the time frame that all the pipes in the road are going to be in the ground, and we're going to be ready for people to start connecting their homes to those pipes in the ground. And written into that will be a date in there that thou shalt connect by, and working backwards 5 years from that date. If your septic system fits within that 5-year window, then you would be eligible to defer connection for 5 years.
Yeah, 5 years from the date that you installed your system. So like if you did a 2025 system, you hook up in 2030?
No, we're thinking 5 years from the actual thou shalt connect by. So
add 5 years to 2028?
Yeah.
And everyone will connect then that had a new system?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good question. Any other questions?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
just for clarification, the proposed eligibility to keep your septic system says less than 5 years. That's presumably less than 5 years from 2028. So it effectively excludes anybody with an existing septic system. It'll just be new build since now. Just wanted to clarify that.
yeah, that is correct. Yeah.
If, I guess this can't be 100% chance, but if, whatever that date was that Derry said, 2020, fall of 2025, or I forget already, for that the province fully approves the plan, would there be kind of a, like, well, it would be a little bit silly for people to put in a new septic system for that 3 years or something. I mean, obviously, if they had an emergency and it was failing, what can you do? But is there going to be any kind of even notice saying don't put in a new septic system unless absolutely necessary, or any kind of recommended hold or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're going to be in constant communication with the community on timelines as we get closer to that time. And I think you're right, as we get closer to knowing when that timeline is going to be, and if somebody is building a home a year or two out from that connection date, there might be options for something, for perhaps a holding tank. Perhaps Ella, you could maybe speak to that a little bit from Island Health's perspective. But
yeah, no, a holding tank would definitely be an option. I've had a few people in Union Bay area approach me and ask that same question, and they're kind of going through that process. So that's definitely a temporary option for them. Yeah.
okay, yeah.
I had one other question that's kind of related to this. It seems like if the 2028 is when we expect to hook up, but the staff report showed that the taxes would come in probably around 2027. Is that maybe just an estimate because we don't know the exact dates, or would those charges on our taxes start when we hook up, or would they start when the force main is being built? Or yeah.
Good question. I certainly will defer to our finance staff on this one as well, but I think generally, the 2027 is an estimate. When we're talking about connecting in 2028, like Vince said, pipes will be in the ground likely. So construction will have occurred kind of through 2026 and 2027. And so in order for the system to be constructed, the community will have had to borrow the funds to do that. And so I'm not sure exactly when kind of, loan repayment starts when you borrow. Maybe, I don't know if Mark, but it should be right around that time, likely. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Gary's answer was good. Once the project is constructed and the CBRD has taken out a loan, then the debt payments start. And although I think they're semi-annual or annual payments, I don't think they're monthly. like they might be for a mortgage, but so it's, you know, it's conceivable that the charges would start in kind of that year of construction, even prior to being connected.
Director Arbor, sorry, and then we'll go to Jim.
Yeah, thanks. Maybe Jim was going to ask that, but I was thinking, when you talk about the start of that payment, I guess you wouldn't charge the operations component and perhaps just the capital in those 2 years ahead, or would you charge the full amount right away because there won't be operations component happening?
Thanks, Director Arbor. I wonder if it would be appropriate to maybe ask for the next TACPAC meeting for just maybe some clarification around those financing questions. Just might be helpful.
Yeah, certainly we can do that. But yes, to answer Director Arbor's questions, the operating costs wouldn't likely be charged until the system was up and operational.
Maybe that would be helpful for the public open houses.
Jim?
Yeah, I mean, this is a little bit of change in tactic, because I do remember early on we discussed people not paying for the service until they had it. So I understand the difficulty in the regional district's financing because the money's not coming in and the project could take 2 years, but we certainly did discuss that people wouldn't have to pay for the service until they had it, is my recollection of it. You know, if all of a sudden there's a holdup in construction of another year, that's another year that we're paying for a service that we don't have. And I have a little bit of difficulty with that, you know, for a number of reasons, but I really don't think it's fair to charge people for a service that they do not have the ability to enjoy. You know, on some of the delays I'm thinking may occur is there may be some archaeological delay due to some unforeseen discoveries, materials delay. Who knows where we're going to be in a couple of years from now? There could be another big COVID outbreak, so construction could go for 4 years or whatever. But I just don't think it's fair to be charging residents for service they don't receive.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Certainly take that feedback back to our finance staff and discuss timelines and potential options with them.
Any other questions about this or the septic deferral program? Okay, Vince?
Okay, yeah, the next item is the septic mandatory maintenance program. This is just one slide to summarize a report that was presented to the Electoral Areas Services Committee back in October, and it was referred to this committee as well. So at that October meeting, there was support expressed for a region-wide mandatory maintenance program. This would see mandatory inspections in high-risk areas, as well as mandatory pump outs in all other areas. We've done some analysis and further engagement with provincial staff, and we've had some legal advice on this. And out of all this, in order for the regional district to impose requirements for septic systems, we would require BC cabinet approval of an order in council to provide the regional district the authority to move into this area of public health. So what we're aiming at is some public engagement in the spring on the program concept in support of an order in council request in the summer of 2024. So pending receipt of the order in council, a service establishment process would proceed in 2025, and if supported by residents, the regulatory program could then start up in 2026. In regards to how this fits into the Liquid Waste Management Plan Addendum report, the report does include language in support of a septic regulatory program within the plan area. That's the areas that we're considering for sewer servicing. So pending provincial approval of the liquid waste management plan and issuance as well of the order in council, this would then allow a septic regulatory program to move forward within the plan area if for any event the proposed region-wide program does not proceed. So happy to answer any further questions on the maintenance program proposal.
So just so I'm clear, Vince, so let's say the order in council isn't successful. If you include it in this addendum, you can proceed. No, you need to, oh, I
We
see.
need the
no
order
matter
in
what.
council no
Okay.
matter what.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions? Jim?
Anybody else besides me?
Go ahead.
Okay, well, I support the concept of mandatory pump outs and some sort of program. And in the event that this doesn't proceed as the big pipe solution, I think it would be better to use the carrot rather than the stick approach to get people to upgrade their systems. And I think if we could think outside the box, perhaps we can find some way of funding those systems. We're not talking a lot of money here. The existing residents, I think in phase one is like 250 roughly homes in phase one for connection. Am I wrong with that? 260?
Or 450 approximately total in Royston and Union Bay.
In phase one.
Yeah, phase one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you're, if you had like a 50% subsidy to put new systems in, we're probably talking about $5 million, right? So quick math. But I think if this doesn't proceed, the whole principle behind this is to protect health and vein sound, and that maybe we need to kind of think outside the box and see if there's some way of getting a fund established to provide a subsidy to encourage people to change those systems out rather than have it all fall on the homeowner by virtue of the stick. I mean, the carrot's much better.
Ryan?
I think the problem with that, Jim, is if we have a system coming online in 2028, not a lot of people are going to want to pump money into a brand new septic system. Like if it were me.
I was actually talking about if this whole big pipe thing doesn't go through, then obviously that there's going to be a number of systems that need to be replaced, and think about some type of funding to help those residents.
Let's hope that you don't have to have that discussion. Yeah. Any other questions or comments, observations? Tabitha?
Just to clarify, if the sewer addendum is approved by the province, this regulatory program will not happen at all, and including in areas like say Denman Island or that are not part of the plan or whatever.
No, if the sewer extension south project goes forward, this is on a parallel track, and that's why we're proposing a program region wide. And once we get to a point where the sewer extension project is approved and we're setting up service areas for local collection networks, then those properties within those local collection network sewer connection network areas would then not be part of this septic maintenance program because they would no longer have septic systems.
So the program would apply to other areas though?
That's correct.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for clarifying.
I kind of missed that point that it's going to be throughout. So obviously those numbers don't make sense. However, it may be a way of somebody meeting the requirements under the master development agreement to provide an expandable service for that area. So potentially some funding, well, it kind of cuts them out of the picture, but they may have their own thing going on by then as well. So I think regardless of what happens in this process, that we need to be cognizant that that requirement is still there in that master development agreement to provide an expandable service, and there may be a source of funding there. I don't know.
Any other thoughts? Can we then just go to the next slide, which I think is the next steps, right? So this is where we're headed, and do we want to talk about there was a meeting planned for January of TACPAC, and just because of the scheduling, you're going to be having open houses and more consultation in January. So the proposal is to shift this meeting into March or April.
Yeah, that's correct. So we'll be sending out a cancellation notice for that meeting shortly and trying to rebook something in March or April.
I assume that meets with your approval. You just want to not have this committee end, I think, right? So just draw it out a little bit longer. And that's our agenda for today, correct?
Yeah, it is. I'm not sure how we made it through so quickly. And I'm also not sure if lunch is even here yet. But we'll check on that. Please, yeah, stick around for lunch, and hopefully we'll see everyone at the open houses in January.
Yeah, and again, I just want to say my thanks for your volunteer efforts in supporting this process to date, and for your always good questions and good discussion, and yeah, good luck with the consultation in January. So is lunch here? It's no, but it will be in the next little while.
Sometime before noon, that's all I know.
Okay, sometime before noon. So please hang around if you want, and we'll see you. I will see you in March or April. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone. And I'd also just like to say, I know it's been a lot of information today, so please feel free to reach out directly to Vince or I in the next little while if you have any comments or questions or concerns. Happy to discuss. Thank you.
Did we vote on Royston Pump Station last time, like location and design? Or did we start that process and then we were going to talk about another pump station, and then what sort of happened to that lane?
So the committee voted on the location of the pump station kind of at the bottom of Royston Road there, and also supported the idea of a building with some public amenities as opposed to a kiosk. So since then, WSP's done some additional work to look at some flood mitigation options for a pump station built in that area. And so there's some options provided in the addendum report. You know, one kind of looks at a bit of an upgraded structure building that could protect against future flooding or wave activities. Another option looks at potentially moving kind of some of the electrical components up the hill out of the flood zone, but still generally kind of looking at that same location that the committee voted on, just some potentially alternate options to the look and feel of that.
Okay. So we don't need to vote again on that.
Yeah, so I guess staff's thought on that one was that, you know, we do need to take a little bit of a closer look at that area and investigate those options in a little bit more detail. So we'd propose to do that during the detailed design phase, get a better idea of you know, what those options look like and what the potential cost implications would be, and then come back to the committee with those options.
And as far as the pump station in Union Bay, have we discussed that? I've lost track of that. So have we voted on something there yet, or?
So the pump station in Union Bay is proposed to be located on Union Bay Estates land. So we're still in discussions with the developer around kind of the exact location of that pump station. The addendum report includes kind of an option for both a kiosk style pump station, as well as a building for that location as well, which we can kind of which we will discuss further with the landowner and with this committee once we move into detailed design.
Thank you.
I probably should have said that when we meet in March, April, the final meeting of TACPAC, there will be a request to make a motion to support the final addendum draft report. So some of those details maybe there'll be more details sent, but also, we'll formalize the committee's support at that time.
I know there's also concern in the communities about, so all these other projects coming online, like water, right? People don't want to dig up the road for 8 years, that kind of stuff. They want things streamlined, but obviously costs go up with that, with these major infrastructure projects. Is this something that you guys would consider in SES? Would you consider another component, adding, like putting water in beside the trench, like trenching, just trying to consolidate the work? I guess people don't want to be put out for 8 to 10 years. That's what I've been hearing.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Certainly it would be staff's intention to kind of minimize the impact as much as possible. That said, there are requirements around kind of setbacks between water and sewer lines, and a lot of times those services end up on opposite sides of the road, but certainly look to coordinate where possible, and maybe Mark can add to that as well.
Yeah, because we also know that Fortis came down and they've already trenched with minimal impact. But then if there's going to be sewer and then water, etc.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And, believe it or not, we do try to coordinate as much as possible. I know from a homeowner's perspective, it can seem frustrating when streets dug up and then a year later, a different entity comes by and digs up the exact same part. So we try to avoid that. We try to work with other stakeholders, utilities to understand what they're doing. So but I'll just speak quickly about the kind of 3 main things that are going to happen in the future for Royston and Union Bay. So the water extension south project is going to happen a little bit ahead of the sewer extension south if everything goes to plan. We feel like that still makes sense because it will be in the opposite side of the road. We'll still provide opportunity for the flow of traffic. Whereas if we tried to do both at the same time, it could be a real negative impact to traffic. So that's the thinking there. That line would extend along the Island Highway. For the most part, it might be off the Island Highway for some parts of it, but to about Argyle Road. And then end there. And whereas the South Sewer project goes, of course, all the way to Union Bay. But it would be a little bit later. So you're right. There will be an impact for an extended period of time as those 2 projects are kind of happening in series rather than together. And then the other big project that I talked about was the water distribution system upgrades that are going to be coming, but those are projected to be like 15 years down the road when there's kind of an intensive renewal and replacement of water distribution infrastructure. So unfortunately, I think that project is going to happen, kind of 10 years after the collection system's put in. So not a lot of opportunity to match those up. But if everything does, if all these projects do come to pass, it will be a bit intense in the area.
Thanks, Mark.
Anything else? Oh, Jim.
Well, we're trying to kill some time here, so I'll just talk.
It's at this point when you've adjourned the meeting or almost adjourned the meeting. That's when the real discussion happens, I think.
So, I mean, if we back way up, the whole concept of this is to protect Bay and Sound. I'm curious what empirical data was used, what reports were used to verify that there is an issue in Bay and Sound. Logically, yes, the septic systems are at an age where they could be failing, and the assumption is that they're failing. But I'm just curious which reports were used. Was it the Payne report? What was the year of those reports? And the reason I ask this question is a few of us here are going to be attending the Eco Forum on Bain Sound on Friday. And that's one of the questions that I put forward that be discussed is to who has all this varying data. There's a lot of data out there. Environment Canada have data. The shellfish growers have some data. So I'd be curious to see what their data shows in terms of sewage contamination in the areas that they monitor and exactly where it's coming from. And I was wondering what report the regional district was relying on for this project.
Director Arbour, you seem keen to respond.
I was hoping staff will be able to direct Jim and the committee to some of the reports that underpin the work specifically to sewage, but I thought I would also note that so I sit on a number of committees related to Bain Sound, and we just need to acknowledge that there are multiple contributors to the current and future health of Bain Sound. So this project, I would say, is one of the many things that need to happen. Or that's why you also see the septic maintenance regulation coming in, because this project would only cover a part of it. The evidence we have around norovirus, we've had a lot of norovirus outbreaks in recent years, and that significantly impacts the ability of producers to get their product to market. And one of them can be septic. You can't always derive empirically exactly where it comes from. I know they're doing efforts as well with the boating community. So there's numerous places where that can come from. There's two more threats to Bain Sound is the warming and ocean acidification. And there's also a lot of efforts going on there. So we really have our hands full in terms of trying to protect both the environment and the activities that occur there. But for the purpose of this committee, I think Derry and Mark would be able to direct you to the report. I think it's 2015 report that's still the basis. But as you said, Jim, that we know that norovirus outbreaks have actually, there's been more of them since then. So I just thought I'd contribute that.
Yeah, thanks, Director Arbour. So yeah, as you mentioned, there's a 2015 report that kind of summarizes a lot of the information that was used as the basis. So a groundwater monitoring program that you referred to, Jim, in 2009, completed by Payne Engineering, as well as water quality monitoring completed by Environment Canada in the area. And, we've heard from Island Health around kind of system age and some of the potential concerns around systems of the age that the systems in this area are. And then, yes, as Director Arbour has noted, there's been multiple norovirus outbreaks in the area in the past number of years. We know that norovirus is directly related to kind of human sewage, although, the sources of that can be multiple and are kind of, I guess, unknown. But certainly something we still continue to work with other agencies on. I know the BC Centre for Disease Control is going to be starting a genome mapping project in Bain Sound in the new year, looking at potential sources of that norovirus contamination. So that'll be really interesting information to have. And other members of the norovirus working group, including Transport Canada and others, also continue to look at the issue and identify potential options for mitigation. So it's certainly something that's of concern to multiple agencies and obviously the community. And many efforts on all fronts to look to improve the situation.
Christian?
Yep, just to support that. So we actually have 4 reports posted on our public engagement site, and that includes the reports referenced by Darien Director Arbor. And I'm sure we can probably send an email around with links to those.
Anything else? Okay, we will adjourn the meeting, and we hope you'll join us for lunch when it arrives. Thank you.